Shortly after his release from Landsberg Castle, Hitler realized that the SA had become too disorganized and unmanageable, while Röhm had acquired dangerously excessive power. In fact, the SA had become a burden to him. He no longer needed a paramilitary force, as he was now seeking power through peaceful means. All he required was a small group of men to protect him at his public meetings. In 1925, Röhm, dissatisfied, resigned from the SA and moved to Bolivia. In 1925, a disillusioned Röhm left the SA and relocated to Bolivia. Later, Hitler explained his reasoning. "At that time, I thought I needed a group of bodyguards which, though small, would consist of men completely loyal to me, even prepared to act against their own comrades if necessary. It was preferable to have only 20 men from a single city, provided I could trust them completely, rather than an unstable multitude." Although Hitler had been impressed by the performance of the Stoßtruppe during the putsch, it was officially dissolved while he was imprisoned. With no confidence in the SA and without a personal protection unit, he quickly ordered Schreck to create a new elite formation. Following Göring's suggestion, this new unit would be known as the Schutzstaffel, Protection Squad, SS, a reference to the escort aircraft used during his time in Richthofen's elite squadron. Initially, the unit consisted of only 8 men, all former members of the Stoßtruppe, but on 21 September 1925, Schreck issued a circular to all party cells requesting the formation of SS squads. Nevertheless, the SS would remain a selective group. While the SA accepted virtually anyone, SS recruits had to undergo a strict selection process. They could be no younger than 23 nor older than 35 and had to be in good health and of strong constitution. In addition, their personal character had to be impeccable. They were required to have lived in the same area for at least 5 years, to present 2 personal guarantors, to enjoy a good reputation, and to have no criminal record. According to guidelines issued by the SS, habitual drunkards, gossips, and other offenders will not be considered. While the SA continued to grow, the SS remained limited to units of 10 men under 1 officer in each district, with 20 men under 2 officers in Berlin. Each member was required to swear unwavering loyalty, not only to the Nazi Party but also personally to Hitler. SS troops wore a distinctive armband with a black-bordered swastika and a black ski cap bearing the skull insignia of the Stoßtruppe. An early recruit, Alois Rosenwink, commented, "We wear the skull on our black cap as a warning to our enemies and as a sign to our Führer that we will sacrifice our lives for his vision." Using one of his favorite tactics, divide and rule, Hitler sought to inflame the rivalry between the SS and the SA. At a national meeting of the Nazi Party in Weimar in 1926, the Blutfahne was handed over to the loyal hands of the SS, causing resentment among the SA members who were present at the time. Its new bearer was to be Jakob Grimminger of the Munich SS, a tall and imposing man with a moustache in Hitler's style. Grimminger, a veteran of the First World War, joined the Nazi Party in 1922. As a member of the SA, he took part in the Beer Hall Putsch. He was seen carrying the Blutfahne in the 1935 Nazi propaganda film Triumph of the Will. After surviving the war, he was tried for being a member of the SS. Although he managed to avoid imprisonment, his property was confiscated. He later became a city councillor in Munich, but his past hindered his political advancement, and he died in poverty. Nevertheless, Hitler left the SS under the control of the new Reichsführer of the SA, Franz Pfeffer von Salomon. As expected, the SS did not prosper under the command of a man from the SA. It was forbidden to form squads in situations where the SA was not fully established, while local SA men used SS troops as errand boys. The selected elite was reduced to selling newspapers and subscriptions, putting up posters on walls, and canvassing door-to-door for new party members. Throughout this entire period, SS troops were not allowed to deviate from the strict rules of conduct imposed upon them, although they were occasionally involved in fights. In Dresden, the local SS leader boasted that his men had not only repelled an attack by 50 communists, but had also thrown some of them out of the window. Generally, however, the SS avoided the limelight. The Munich police highlighted the discipline required of SS men. The slightest breach of order, according to SS regulations, was punished by cash fines, the removal of the armband for a specified period, or disciplinary measures concerning the individual's conduct and dress. When their documents were checked, every SS man was found to be carrying a Nazi Party membership card, an SS card, and a songbook. The words of one of the songs were, "When all are becoming disloyal, we remain faithful, so that forever on this earth a flag may fly for you." But although the SS could sing, they did not speak. When Berchtold recovered from his wounds, he assumed the post of Reichsführer SS in place of Schreck. In 1926, he established the SS Fördernde Mitglieder, a group of people who financially supported the SS and wore a small silver pin on their lapels. However, Berchtold could not bear the idea of being subordinate to the SA, and so he handed his position over to his deputy, the former Stoßtrupp member Erhard Heiden. But Heiden was no more able to withstand the pressure of the SA than Berchtold had been. Under his leadership, SS membership fell from 1,000 to 280, and there was talk of dissolving the unit. Heiden later appointed a deputy who would not only prove to be his nemesis, but would also become the savior of the SS. That man was Heinrich Himmler. A former member of Röhm's Reichskriegsflagge unit, which had carried the imperial flag at the Ministry of War during the Beer Hall Putsch, Himmler was now a chicken farmer. But he possessed exceptional organizational skills. Heiden fell from favor after allegations emerged that parts of his uniform had been customized by a Jewish tailor. On January 5, 1929, he was dismissed by Adolf Hitler, and his position was taken over by Himmler. 4 years later, in April 1933, the now all-powerful Himmler ordered Heiden's arrest. Members of Reinhard Heydrich's SS Sicherheitsdienst were sent to capture him. He was murdered shortly thereafter, presumably at the SD headquarters in Munich, although his abandoned body was not found until 5 months later. By 1934, however, with SA membership approaching 1 million, Röhm had become Hitler's principal rival. His army of brown-shirted thugs was far larger than the Reichswehr, and his troops supported him completely. Moreover, Röhm wanted to displace the Reichswehr and turn the SA into the new German army with himself in command. As an old friend, Röhm believed that Hitler would support him in his efforts, but Hitler had other plans. During the Night of the Long Knives on June 30, 1934, Hitler personally oversaw Röhm's arrest at a hotel in Bad Wiessee, and the following day Röhm was executed without trial. With no significant rivals remaining, Himmler and his SS were able to advance rapidly into a position of unquestioned power. Although Reichsführer SS Erhard Heiden regarded Heinrich Himmler as little more than a talented employee lacking leadership potential, it was Himmler who saved the SS from extinction. He was not content for the SAS to remain merely a unit of the Sturmabteilung. He established them as an independent force with their own distinct identity, expanding them enormously until they eclipsed and ultimately destroyed Ernst Röhm's SA, born in Munich in 1900 into a middle-class Catholic family. Himmler was too young to fight in the First World War, although he was eager to do so. In 1918, he became an officer cadet, but the war ended before he could be commissioned. His lack of frontline experience was a source of embarrassment, particularly given that his godfather and namesake, Prince Heinrich of Bavaria, had been killed in action in 1916. After the war, Himmler studied agriculture at the Technical Institute of Munich, where he developed a particular interest in animal breeding and genetics. Although he did not know it at the time, he would eventually have the power to put his theories into practice. A small, sickly-looking man who wore a pince-nez, he tried unsuccessfully to distinguish himself in sports, achieving only a small, though highly prized, dueling scar. He continued to fantasize about becoming a soldier, but without an outlet for his passion, he eventually became a fertilizer salesman. It was around this time that Himmler began to develop his obsession with Teutonic mythology and racial purity. Deprived by nature of physical prowess, Himmler became fascinated with the myth of the Nordic warrior, particularly as it appeared in the operas of Richard Wagner. Himmler shared his passion for Wagner's works with Hitler. Filled with Germanic mythology, the operas embodied the vision both men held for the German nation. Himmler was also captivated by stories about Henry I of Germany, the Fowler, who defended Germany against a Slavic invasion in the 10th century. Another of his obsessions was the Order of Teutonic Knights, a religious order that Christianized Prussia, albeit by the sword, in the 13th century. The Knights were defeated by a Polish-Lithuanian army at the Battle of Tannenberg in 1410, but legends of their chivalry endured. The Austrian Emperor Ferdinand I revived the order in 1834, but it disappeared with the end of the Habsburg Empire in 1918. Later, Himmler referenced the Order of Teutonic Knights by naming the 11th SS Panzer Battalion after Hermann von Salza, the order's Grand Master in the 13th century. Himmler's enthusiasm for Germanic mythology was surpassed only by his obsession with racial theory, a field influenced by Alfred Rosenberg, 1893 to 1946. The two men met in 1918 when both were involved in the semi-mystical Thule Society in Munich. Rosenberg was born to German parents in Estonia, but after the Russian Revolution he fled to Munich, where he joined the emerging Nazi Party and became editor of the Völkischer Beobachter, the party's newspaper. In its pages he denounced Jews, communists, Freemasons and Christians, and proclaimed Nazism as a new faith. Even Hitler dismissed his writings as ideological garbage. Official images of Himmler portray him as a small, serious man, a cold ideologue who firmly believed in the Nazis' deadly creed. But like many other mass murderers, he was capable of leading a double life. It is chilling to think that the man who was entirely comfortable with the extermination of the Jewish population could also be a devoted husband and father. Himmler met his future wife in the lobby of a hotel in 1926 while taking shelter from a storm. It is said that when he gallantly removed his hat, he soaked Margareta with the water dripping from its brim. But Margareta Segroth was both divorced and Protestant, and the future tyrant therefore feared bringing her home to meet his Catholic parents. "I would rather clean out a hall full of 1,000 communists," he declared. Despite his parents' disapproval, Himmler found Margaret irresistible. She was blonde and blue-eyed, the epitome of the Nazi ideal. The daughter of a Prussian landowner, she had worked as a nurse during the First World War. She owned a clinic in Berlin when she met Himmler, but sold it to finance a chicken farm when the couple married on July 3, 1928. The couple had high hopes when they purchased a plot of land in Waldrudering, near Munich, on which they built a small wooden house and several chicken coops. They believed this was only the beginning. Soon they would have several farms. But in May 1929, only 10 months after their wedding, Margaret was moved to write a plaintive note. "The hens are laying terribly badly, only 2 eggs a day. I am very worried about how we are going to make a living." They had a daughter, Gudrun, who was born in August 1929. Himmler adored her and called her Puppy. The couple separated in 1940 but avoided the scandal of seeking a divorce. Later, Himmler became involved with his secretary, Hedwig Potthast, who left her job in 1941. He borrowed 80,000 marks from the party chancellery and built a house for her in Schönau, near Hitler's Bavarian retreat in Berchtesgaden, which they called Haus Schneewinkeleien. There, Hedwig struck up a friendship with Greda, the wife of Hitler's secretary, Martin Bormann. Himmler had 2 children with Hedwig, a son, Helga, born in 1942, and a daughter, Nanette Dorothea, born in 1944. Always striving to prove himself physically, Himmler was a member of a student fencing group. It was there that he met Ernst Röhm, who was looking for suitable recruits for his Reichskriegflagge, a super-nationalist group whose chauvinistic and anti-Semitic views Himmler shared. Röhm later encouraged him to join the NSDAP. This was how Himmler came to carry the Reichskriegflagge banner during the Beer Hall Putsch of 1923. He did not play a particularly prominent role. Surviving photographs show him as a small, weak man wearing a helmet several sizes too large. He was fortunate to escape unharmed and avoid arrest, but he lost his job after taking unauthorized leave to attend the march. It was then that he began working full-time for the party. During his brief time in the army, he served as a company clerk, where he learned to keep meticulous records. To demonstrate his abilities, he claimed to have compiled a list of people who had befriended Jews in Lower Bavaria, but at that stage he was dismissed as a fanatic. Nevertheless, his organizational skills proved useful, and in 1925 he became district leader of the newly formed SS in Bavaria. Only 2 years later, in 1927, he was appointed deputy leader of the entire force, serving under Erhard Heiden, although at that time the SS were little more than a small unit within the SA. With the onset of the Great Depression in 1929, industrial production declined sharply and many workers suddenly found themselves unemployed. A large number of them joined the SA, along with a significant proportion of criminals. A dramatic rise in violent incidents was inevitable. The number of SA men injured in the course of duty rose from 110 in 1927 to 2,506 in 1930. In 1929, the Prussian authorities recorded 580 major disturbances involving the SA. This figure had risen to 2,500. On the 6th of January 1929, Himmler took over Haydn's position as leader of the SS. While members of the SA were regarded as an undisciplined mob, the SS troops were seen as an elite corps, which appealed to the middle classes and professionals. At the same time, the strict discipline of the SS attracted former members of the Freikorps, who left the SA to join them. But not just anyone could enlist in Himmler's SS to begin with. Candidates had to display outward signs of Nordic ancestry and be taller than 1.73 meters. Himmler examined photographs of prospective recruits with a magnifying glass, searching for Mongolian or Slavic features. Recruits were required to provide proof of their lineage going back at least 3 generations to demonstrate that they had no Jewish blood. Ordinary SS members had to supply records dating back to January 1, 1800, while officers had to trace their ancestry to January 1, 1750. The men under Himmler's command were also expected to be tall, blonde, and blue-eyed. Unfortunately, a large proportion of existing members, including Himmler himself, did not meet these criteria, so Himmler made an exception for those who had served in the First World War and, of course, for himself. As SS membership increased, Hitler decreed that it should become an independent organization. The old system of 10-man units was abandoned, and a military-style hierarchy with a proper officer structure was introduced. Himmler also redesigned the uniform. Members wore a new black peaked cap with a skull insignia, along with a black tie, trousers, boots, and a crossbelt. Shirt collars were edged with a black and white braided cord, except those of senior leaders, which were adorned with silver. SS shirts also bore black patches with symbols indicating units and rank. Although the SS were beginning to grow under Himmler's leadership, their existence, as well as that of the Nazi Party, remained threatened by the SA. Throughout the rebellion, the SS remained loyal, and Hitler now depended on this force to eradicate any further dissent. Himmler's obsession with record-keeping became significant, and his files on suspicious party members were used to purge all those who opposed Hitler. In this task, Himmler was assisted by a new recruit named Reinhard Heydrich. Although Heydrich would become Himmler's closest confidant, at first Himmler showed no interest in the potential recruit, even cancelling an appointment with him. However, Heydrich was undeterred and showed up anyway. When Himmler saw him, he was impressed by his Nordic appearance and fierce anti-Semitism. "I want to establish a security and intelligence service within the SS, and I need a specialist," Himmler said. "If you think you can handle this managerial work, please write on paper how you would approach it. I'll give you 20 minutes. Improvising, Heydrich outlined a plan for the Sicherheitsdienst, SD security service. He was hired on the spot. Heydrich then moved to the Brown House, the new headquarters of the Nazi Party in Munich. After being shown to a shared room with only a typewriter, he began working at a kitchen table. Despite the conditions, he set up an index card system containing details on aristocrats, communists, Catholics, conservatives, politically active Jews, and Freemasons. He also kept a record of any Nazi deemed unreliable due to large debts or scandals. According to one of Himmler's confidants, Heydrich's mind was a living card index, a brain with all threads intertwined. After less than 4 months in office, Heydrich told a meeting of SS officers that the party was riddled with spies and saboteurs. He recommended that each SS unit create a security detachment to eradicate any disloyal member. Heydrich was rapidly promoted, and everything seemed to be going well. But then a Nazi party member in Halle recalled an old rumor that he was Jewish. Himmler ordered a complete genealogical investigation, which ultimately concluded, "Heydrich is of German origin and free of any red or Jewish blood." However, Himmler realized that Heydrich's fear of being considered Jewish was a weakness that could be used to control him. Heydrich then moved out of the Brown House to establish the SD in a secret location. The organization soon created a network of SS spies that penetrated all aspects of German life. Furthermore, Heydrich maneuvered to remove the SD from the SS chain of command so that his men were loyal only to him. Meanwhile, he reported directly to Himmler, although he intensely despised him. He told his wife that he masked his hatred for his boss by imagining him in his shorts. Then all is well. In 1938, the SD became the state's official intelligence service, putting it in conflict with the Abwehr. Using his greatly expanded powers, Heydrich purged any suspicious elements from the German High Command and then provided false information to Stalin. This caused the Red Army to be purged, leaving it chronically weakened in the days leading up to World War II. Not content with that, Heydrich focused his attention on Germany's Jewish population. On the night of broken glass, Kristallnacht, which took place on November 9, 1938, he ordered the arrest of thousands of Jewish citizens and their deportation to concentration camps while synagogues and their property were attacked. After proving his Nazi loyalty, Heydrich was appointed head of the Reich Main Security Office, RSHA, placing him in charge of all security forces and secret police of the Third Reich. Yet he still found time to stage a false Polish attack on the radio transmitter in Gliwice, Silesia, providing Hitler with a pretext for his invasion of Poland. Shortly after, he joined SS Captain Adolf Eichmann in deporting Jews from Germany and Austria to ghettos in Poland. He also organized the Einsatzgruppen, mobile execution squads that murdered nearly 1 million Polish and Soviet Jews and communists in German-occupied territories. In 1941, Göring asked Heydrich to draw up a plan for the extermination of the Jews. Efficient as ever, Heydrich presented his final solution plan at the Wannsee Conference in January of the following year. Heydrich's relentless personality did not go unnoticed by Hitler, so in September 1941 he was appointed Reichsprotector of Bohemia and Moravia, as the previous Reichsprotector, Konstantin von Neurath, had not been severe enough. Heydrich did not disappoint his master. Anyone who did not cooperate was executed or sent to a concentration camp, while ration cards were issued to factories according to their workers' productivity. Needless to say, industrial production quickly increased. But fate was working against Heydrich. When Emil Hácha, the puppet president of the rest of Czechoslovakia, showed him the Czech crown jewels at Prague Castle, he warned him not to wear the crown. According to legend, anyone who was not the rightful heir would die. But by that point, Heydrich felt invincible, so, laughing, he placed the crown on his head. Curiously, the British government had just sent 2 Czech soldiers to assassinate Heydrich while he drove through Prague in his convertible. Fatally wounded in the incident, he died a week later. Heydrich had kept files on all the top Nazis, including Hitler, so Himmler's first task was to locate the key to the depot containing the evidence. Once everything was cleared, Heydrich received a state funeral and was posthumously awarded the German Order, the highest award of the party and the state. The 2 killers escaped, prompting the Gestapo to retaliate by executing hundreds of Czechs and destroying the entire village of Lidice. After a reward of 1 million Reichsmarks was offered for anyone who knew the killers' whereabouts, the family that had sheltered them was betrayed. The woman of the house committed suicide while her son was tortured and forced to drink. He was then shown his mother's decapitated head in a fish tank. Understandably, he told the Gestapo everything he knew. The killers were cornered in a church where they resisted 700 SS men. With no means of escape, they committed suicide. Anything was better than being captured alive. Under Himmler's leadership, the SS grew rapidly, with its ranks bolstered by recruits too young to have fought in World War I. The organization increased its membership from 2,000 in 1931 to 30,000 in 1932, despite stricter racial criteria. Himmler was so obsessed with race that he even vetoed the marriage of any SS man whose future wife could not provide sufficient evidence of Aryan ancestry. His purpose, he explained, was to create an order of pure blood to serve Germany. To achieve this goal, he would initiate a selective breeding program. "Tomorrow belongs to us," he declared. Now that the SS were becoming a powerful force in their own right, he needed a uniform to match, one that distinguished them from other branches of the German military. In 1932, 2 SS members, Professor Karl Diebitsch and Walter Heck, designed the famous black SS uniform, with black jodhpur pants and riding boots, a black jacket, and a military-style peaked cap. The red armband with the swastika and the SA brown shirt were retained, but the SS insignia was moved to the jacket collar, with the unit indicated on a band around the wrist. Like other Nazi uniforms, it was manufactured by Hugo Boss. The SS lightning bolt insignia, in ancient pagan Germanic runic script modified by Walter Heck, was added the following year, first for the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler, Hitler's personal guard, and then for the entire SS. Professor Karl Diebitsch was an interesting mix of military man and artist. He served in the Imperial Navy during World War I, then resumed his art education by enrolling in the design school of the Academy of Fine and Graphic Arts in Munich. In 1920, he joined the Nazi Party while earning a living as a painter and graphic artist. When Hitler came to power, he moved to Berlin, where he joined the National Association of German Visual Artists and the SS. As an artist interested in military affairs, he was very useful to the SS. He served as director of the SS Porcelain Company until 1936 and designed the ceremonial SS dagger and sword, as well as many other SS items. All of his designs were manufactured at the Dachau concentration camp. He also designed postage stamps and served as an officer in the Waffen SS. Despite the new uniform and his... "The SA are the line infantry. The SS are the guards," he said. In 1932, the SS became responsible for security at the Brown House in Munich. The organization was effectively the party's police force, and Himmler seized the occasion to give the organization a new motto: SS man, loyalty is your honor. Fearing that the SA was planning a coup, the German government banned the wearing of political uniforms. However, when Franz von Papen, a moderate from the Catholic Centre Party, was appointed Chancellor, he lifted the ban 3 months later. In the next elections, in July, the Nazi Party won 230 of the 608 available seats and became the largest party in the Reichstag, but Hitler refused to join the government. Von Papen was only in office for 3 months when his defense minister, General Kurt von Schleicher, convinced President Paul von Hindenburg, the hero of the First World War, that the army no longer trusted him. New elections were called in November 1932 when the Nazis lost 34 seats. Despite the Nazi losses, Papen still could not obtain a majority and was persuaded to resign. Schleicher then attempted to form a coalition with Gregor Strasser, who was still a member of the Nazi Party. But it soon became clear that he could not maintain a parliamentary majority. Finally, on January 23, 1933, Schleicher was forced to admit his failure to Hindenburg. This was Hitler's opportunity. He knew he could form a government, and Hindenburg also knew it, although the president had sworn to keep Hitler out of power. Soon, Himmler had another opportunity to become involved in Nazi foreign policy. Following the army reorganization after the accusations against Blomberg and Fritsch in 1938, Hitler also dismissed his foreign minister Konstantin von Neurath, a veteran heir of von Papen. Von Neurath was replaced by Himmler's man Joachim von Ribbentrop. Himmler had been grooming Ribbentrop since he joined the party in 1932 and had made him an honorary colonel of the SS. Ribbentrop was a vain man who liked wearing the black SS uniform, so he gladly welcomed the opportunity to join the foreign ministry staff working with SS men. Educated in Germany, Switzerland, France and England, Ribbentrop was in Canada when the First World War broke out in 1914. Eager to serve his country, he returned to Germany and served as a hussar on the Eastern Front before becoming an intelligence officer in Turkey. After the war, he married the daughter of a sect producer, the German version of champagne, and persuaded a distant noble relative to adopt him so he could add the prefix von to his name. In 1932, he met Hitler and joined the Nazi Party, becoming Hitler's chief foreign policy advisor by simply memorizing Hitler's words and repeating them. Between 1936 and 1938, he was German ambassador at the court of St. James, where his mission was to forge an alliance between Germany and the British Empire. Instead, he completely alienated the British. First, Ribbentrop had an affair with Wallis Simpson, who later became Edward VIII's wife after his abdication. Then he greeted George VI at a court reception with a shout of "Heil Hitler!" and a Nazi salute that nearly knocked the king over as he stepped forward to shake his hand. Goering warned Hitler to recall Ribbentrop because he was an imbecile, but Hitler dismissed Goering's fears. Ribbentrop knows quite a few important people in England. he said. "Mein Führer, that may be true," replied Goering, "but the problem is that they know him." Ribbentrop may not have succeeded in seducing England, but he had somewhat more success with the Japanese, with whom he negotiated the Anti-Comintern Pact in 1936. The Comintern, Communist International, was a communist organization founded in Moscow in 1919 with the goal of promoting a worldwide communist revolution. When Ribbentrop returned from England in 1938, he was promoted against all odds, becoming German foreign minister instead of von Neurath. Some say it was because he flattered Hitler, others claim it was because he was a fervent warmonger. One of his first moves was to sign the Pact of Steel with Mussolini. Then, in August 1939, he signed the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, also known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, because it was also signed by Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov. Germany immediately gained the ability to invade Poland without reprisal from the Soviet Union. When World War II broke out, Ribbentrop signed the Tripartite Pact with Italy and Japan, establishing the Axis powers. However, he gradually fell out of favor with Hitler and disappeared from the public eye. After being captured in Hamburg, he was sentenced to be hanged at the Nuremberg Trials. Invasion of Czechoslovakia. After the Anschluss, Hitler's next foreign policy target was Czechoslovakia. Formed after the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the end of World War I, Czechoslovakia was home to 3 million people of German origin. Most of them lived in the Sudetenland, an area in the western half of the country. Working behind the scenes, the SS funded the Sudeten German Party, SDP, which saw Hitler and National Socialism as role models. Additionally, Heydrich deployed SD spies in the Sudetenland. They collected so much information that 2 new telecommunications lines had to be built between the German-Czech border and Berlin. Hitler's goal, and that of the SDP, was to integrate the Sudetenland into Germany, but the leader of the Sudeten German Party, Konrad Henlein, was considered too moderate. In fact, he sought independence for the Czechoslovak Germans, not union with the Reich. So Heydrich took measures to undermine him. First, the Vomi formed a 5th column to undermine the Czech government. Then the SS cultivated Nazis within the party's radical wing. This forced Henlein to quickly adopt the Nazi motto, Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. Fearing that a German invasion of Czechoslovakia would trigger a war, leaders of Great Britain, France, Italy and Germany met in Munich. On September 30th, 1938, they attempted to appease Hitler by instructing the Czechoslovak president Edvard Beneš to hand the Sudetenland over to Germany. Henlein was appointed SS Lieutenant General and became a member of the Reichstag and governor of the Sudetenland. He committed suicide in Allied captivity after the war. Throughout the crisis, the SS had bypassed Ribbentrop and the German ambassador in Prague, who opposed the annexation of Czechoslovakia. However, encouraged by their success in the West, Heydrich and the SD began fomenting the Slovak independence campaign in the eastern part of the country. At first, they tried a diplomatic approach, sending Wilhelm Kepler to speak with the ultranationalist Slovak People's Party. However, Slovak State Minister Karel Sidor backed down and independence negotiations stalled. Kepler joined the Nazi Party in the 1920s and was part of a circle of businessmen who provided him with financial support. He was elected to the Reichstag in early 1933 and later that same year became Commissioner of Economic Affairs. At that time, he joined Himmler's circle. In 1938, Kepler was assigned to the German embassy in Vienna, where he prepared the ground for the Anschluss. During the war, he was chairman of many SS companies and, in January 1942, became an SS Lieutenant General. In 1945, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison but was released in 1951. For the Nazis, the time for talking was over, so Heydrich sent a sabotage squad under the command of SS Major Alfred Naujoks. After the saboteurs placed a bomb in a chocolate factory in the Slovak capital, Bratislava, a state of emergency was declared. Described as an intellectual gangster, Naujoks studied engineering at the University of Kiel, although he seems to have spent most of his time involved in fights. In 1931, he joined the SS, where he became one of Heydrich's most reliable agents. He then participated in a series of actions aimed at creating chaos. For example, he led an attack on a radio station in Gliwice, Czechoslovakia, which effectively started World War II, triggered a purge in the Red Army. and planted bombs in Czechoslovakia to frame Slovak nationalists. Naujoks also participated in the Venlo incident with Walter Schellenberg and took part in Operation Bernard, which used prisoners from Sachsenhausen concentration camp to counterfeit British banknotes. But he then made the mistake of disputing one of Heydrich's orders, resulting in his demotion and deployment to the Eastern Front with the Waffen SS. While with his new unit, he murdered members of the Danish resistance and terrorized Denmark. In November 1944, Naujoks defected to the Americans, but on second thought escaped from the internment camp where he was held. He is believed to have been one of the men behind Odessa, the organization that trafficked former SS members out of Europe. Pressure on Czechoslovakia increased. While the Vomi organized demonstrations in Prague, the SD brought the leader of the Slovak People's Party, Josef Tiso, to visit Hitler. Seduced by the prospect of power, Tiso announced that he was willing to lead an independent Slovakia under German protection. Hitler then issued an ultimatum demanding Slovakia's independence, the formation of a new puppet government in Prague, and payment in gold and currency in exchange for German protection. On March 15, 1939, the German army marched. Hitler made his triumphant entrance in a convertible. As he drove through the streets of Prague, he was flanked by his foreign minister Ribbentrop and Himmler, the true architect of the annexation. Tiso remained president of Slovakia until the arrival of the Red Army in 1945. He was hanged for treason in 1947. The next task of the SS was to provide Hitler with a pretext to invade Poland. On 31 August 1939, a week after Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact, Alfred Naujoks and a team of 5 SD operatives took over the radio station in the border town of Gliwice. They were dressed in Polish uniforms, and one of them delivered an incendiary speech in Polish against the Germans. To make the attack appear more convincing, they carried the body of Franciszek Honiok, a Silesian German known to sympathize with the Poles, who had been arrested by the Gestapo the day before. Honiok was dressed to appear as a saboteur. Then his corpse was riddled with bullets and left at the site along with the bodies of other Dachau prisoners. Like Honiok, they had been prepared by the Germans, who called them conserve, canned goods. Several American journalists were summoned, but no one was particularly convinced. However, the Völkischer Beobachter published the headline, "Unprecedented Bandit Attack on the Gliwice Radio Station." The attack was one in a series of incidents designed to discredit Poland. The SS then carved out a new role for themselves. Their task was to follow the army and liquidate Poland's political and cultural elite. It was thought that with the country left leaderless, Poland would become a vast reservoir of Untermenschen, subhumans, who could be used as slaves. Hitler realized that the Wehrmacht commanders would not approve mass murder, so SS members were formed into Einsatzgruppen, deployment groups with an innocuous name. There were 6 units, each consisting of 400 to 600 men. Each of the 5 armies was followed by an Einsatzgruppe, and the 6th group was sent to the border province of Poznan, which Hitler intended to incorporate into the Reich. The agency in charge of the Einsatzgruppen was the RSHA. Heydrich, its chief, had already prepared death lists. His intended victims included all aristocrats, businessmen, some priests, doctors, teachers, civil servants, and political leaders. At that time, there was no specific order for the murder of Jews, but SS General Udo von Woysch took it upon himself to kill them anyway. A week after the invasion, SS commanders boasted of killing 200 Polish citizens per day, and by September 27th, Heydrich could report that only 3% of the Polish high society had survived. Taking advantage of a secret protocol of the German-Soviet non-aggression pact, the Soviet Union invaded eastern Poland on September 17th. Following the German example, the Soviets also stripped Poland of its elite by murdering over 4,000 army officers in the Katyn forest. By late September, fighting in Poland had ended and the country was partitioned between Germany and the Soviet Union. The western regions were absorbed into Greater Germany, while most of the country became a German colony called the General Government, a region separate from the Greater German Reich. The Wehrmacht was then freed from occupation duties and Himmler intervened. The colony would be run by his Einsatzgruppen and the killing would continue. Eventually, all of Poland would become an SS colony. SS General Otto Hoffmann of the RSHA simply said, The East belongs to the SS. The VOMY took charge of resettling 136,000 ethnic Germans into the Soviet-occupied zone, along with 120,000 ethnic Germans from the Baltic states, which had been invaded by the Soviet Union under the secret protocol of the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact. For Himmler, this was a gift. He had long believed in the superiority of the noble German peasant and could now put his theories into practice. Jews and Slavs in Poland would be dispossessed and their places taken by ethnic Germans who would compensate for Germany's low birth rate by populating the East with their Nordic descendants. Himmler convinced Hitler to allow him to take charge of this project, and a decree was issued on October 7, 1939, Himmler's birthday. Heydrich oversaw the resettlement of what Hitler called Jews, Poles, and similar trash. It was evident that more bureaucracy would be needed. Himmler established the Reich Commission for the Strengthening of the German Ethnic Group, RKFD-5, to coordinate the operation. Its head would be Ulrich Greifeld, who had worked with Göring on behalf of Himmler during Hitler's four-year plan to rearm Germany and improve its economy. After serving in the army during World War I, Greifeld managed a manufacturing plant before losing his job during the Great Depression. Before becoming head of the RKFD-5, Greifeld successfully organized the repatriation of ethnic Germans from South Tyrol, just inside the Italian border. Although Greifeld was more familiar with organization and technology than with racial theory, he was tried at Nuremberg along with 14 other members of the RKFDV and Russia. He was found guilty of crimes against humanity, war crimes, and membership in a criminal organization. As the Allies saw the SS sentenced to life imprisonment, he died in Landsberg prison. Himmler's dream of an idyllic German peasant life in Poland was shattered when Greifeld pointed out that army recruitment had created a labor shortage within Germany, requiring an additional 500,000 workers. Greifeld's realism triumphed over Himmler's fantasies. Slavs and Jews were deported eastward, while 500,000 ethnic Germans were uprooted and returned to the Reich, where they were put to work in armaments factories. Many of them did not want to be resettled thousands of miles from home, but Himmler saw this as a good sign. He exclaimed that it was in the nature of German blood to resist. But long stays in the resettlement camps had left returning Germans disappointed, bitter, and hopeless, according to an SS officer. The occupation of Poland was only a prelude to the invasion of the Soviet Union. The SS Race and Resettlement Office had already drafted the General Plan Ost. This plan involved deporting some 14 million people from the steppes and forests of Western Russia to Siberia. They would be replaced by 2.4 million Germans. Another 14 million inhabitants would be allowed to stay after being Germanized. Perhaps the word forced is more appropriate. Most of the population would be confined to towns of about 20,000, surrounded by villages with 30 or 40 armed peasants. Finally, Himmler would have his aristocracy of German peasants. He even ordered scientists to breed a hardy horse capable of surviving the harsh winters of the steppes. It would not only serve as a riding and draft animal, but also provide milk, cheese, and meat. Unfortunately for Himmler, this utopia in the East would remain a sublime idea in his head because Göring had his own plans. To avoid a personality clash, Hitler put Alfred Rosenberg in charge. Hitler encountered more resistance than he had anticipated when he invaded the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. The Red Army was poorly equipped and unprepared, but it had two allies, the Russian autumn rains and a civilian population willing to fight to the end. By the end of 1941, the Soviet Union was wounded but not defeated. The bitter struggle between the two nations would last until 1945. Stalingrad may have been lost, but the SS still managed to make their presence felt in other areas. In a famous incident, the Red Army attempted to trap the 16th German Army at Demyansk, south of Leningrad. The intention was to cut the Germans off from the Stare Russa rail line, leaving them without supplies. Beginning in January 1942, the Red Army dedicated every available man and machine to the encirclement of the SS Totenkopf Division, 5 Wehrmacht infantry divisions, and several German auxiliary divisions. But the SS men were trained to fight to the death if necessary. After months of bloody fighting, the SS Totenkopf Division finally broke through the enemy armor. The Totenkopf commander, SS Lieutenant General Theodor Eicke, was awarded the Oak Leaves to the Knight's Cross. The SS Totenkopf division was then withdrawn to France, where it was reorganized and retrained along with Das Reich and the Leibstandarte. When the three divisions were perfected in battle readiness, they were formed into the ISS Panzer Corps, which was sent to the Eastern Front in January 1943, just as the Wehrmacht was being crushed at Stalingrad. SS Lieutenant Colonel Joachim Peiper formed a battalion of the Leibstandarte and rescued the 320th Infantry Division of the Wehrmacht at Kharkov, earning the Knight's Cross. The son of an army officer, Peiper volunteered to serve in the Leibstandarte in 1934 and then attended the Junkerschule in Brunswick. He was Himmler's adjutant from 1938 to 1939. When the war broke out, he served in the Leibstandarte, a motorized regiment, during the campaign in Western Europe. The Soviets bitterly denounced Peiper's Flame Battalion. The force earned its name by attacking enemy-occupied villages at night as its troops fired indiscriminately and set thatched roofs on fire. Peiper was accused of similar tactics in Italy. When he returned to the Eastern Front as commander of the 1st SS Panzer Regiment, he earned the Oak Leaves to his Knight's Cross, but was again accused of burning villages and killing prisoners. By 1943, Himmler was beginning to realize that the tide was turning against Germany. What the homeland needed were more SS troops on the battlefield, and quickly. Entire divisions, not battalions, were added at great speed. However, this was nothing new. Throughout the war, the Waffen SS grew from 3 elite divisions of German-born Aryans to an international force comprising 41 divisions and many other units. The number of Waffen SS troops never exceeded 10% of the total German army, but their troops were far deadlier than those of their largest rival. Foreign nationals began joining the Waffen SS ranks in 1941, when the SS Nordland Regiment was formed with Danish and Norwegian volunteers. Building on that earlier success, Himmler withdrew the SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment Nordland from the line in February and used it as the basis for the 11th SS Volunteer Panzer Grenadier Division Nordland. Divisions were also formed in France, and later in the year Hitler Youth Volunteers were incorporated into the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitler Jugend. The Scandinavian and French nationals were one thing, but Himmler's greatest deviation from his Aryan ideal occurred when he managed to persuade Hitler to allow him to form a Bosnian Muslim division. The 13th Waffen SS Mountain Division Handschar, 1st Croatian, was created to fight Tito's Yugoslav partisans. After that, a division of volunteers from Galicia, the part of Poland absorbed by Ukraine after the Soviet invasion of 1939, was formed. But Himmler could not afford to wait for more volunteers to arrive. There was a war to fight. Conscription was introduced in the Reichskommissariat of Ostland, and the 15th Waffen-SS Grenadier Division, 1st Latvian, was created. By the time the 16th SS Panzer Grenadier Division Reichsführer SS was formed in Germany, the Waffen-SS had expanded from 8 divisions to 16. They were extremely necessary. By that time, the Allies were approaching ever closer. When they landed at Anzio in January 1944, the 16th SS Panzer Grenadier Division Reichsführer SS sent a combat group to engage them. This was followed by the Brigata d'Assalto Milizia Armata, known to the Germans as the 1st Italian Volunteer Sturm Brigade. The brigade performed so well that Himmler, delighted, declared it should be fully integrated into the Waffen-SS. Despite some local successes, the war was going badly for Germany, so the Waffen-SS expanded again in 1944. Conscripts and volunteers from German-occupied territories were recruited, and several Waffen-SS divisions were hastily created. Ostland was again plundered for conscripts. First, Latvia had to deliver the remaining combat-age men, and then Estonia was forced to supply enough troops for a division. In the Balkans, the 21st Waffen-SS Mountain Division Skanderbeg, 1st Albanian, was created from Albanian and Kosovar volunteers. The speed with which some of these non-German divisions were formed was matched only by the brevity of their basic training. Inexperienced troops were often sent into battle after only 2 or 3 weeks of instruction, and many units received captured equipment of varied origin. In addition, officers and soldiers shared a mix of languages in some forces, sometimes complicating vital communications. Despite this, some divisions performed exceptionally well, even by SS standards. A second Waffen-SS Cavalry Division was then formed, the 22nd SS Volunteer Cavalry Division Maria Theresia. Most of its men were ethnic German conscripts from the Hungarian army. Later, another division from the Netherlands was formed, followed by a polyglot division that was actually the size of a brigade. The 24th Waffen SS Gehbergs division was composed of ethnic German volunteers from Italy, along with other volunteers from Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, and Ukraine. Its primary purpose was to fight partisans along the borders of Slovenia, Italy, and Austria, where mountainous terrain required specialized troops and equipment. By 1944, Germany was fighting Great Britain and the United States in the west and the Soviet Union in the east. Hitler had always been aware that fighting on two fronts was nothing but suicide. Indeed, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact had been designed in 1939 to prevent that very possibility. Chapter 9. Nuremberg Winston Churchill did not believe that captured Nazis should be afforded the luxury of a trial after World War II. He favored immediate execution. However, at the Yalta Conference in February 1945, Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union agreed to try Nazi leaders and other war criminals. They were not only targeting Hitler and Himmler. The International Military Tribunal was established by the London Conference in August 1945. It was given the authority to indict the accused on 4 charges: crimes against peace, planning and initiating wars of aggression, crimes against humanity, genocide, extermination and deportation, war crimes and violations of the laws of war, and conspiracy to commit any of the first 3 offenses. Britain, the United States, the Soviet Union, and France would each provide a judge and a prosecutor. The International Military Tribunal held its first session on October 18, 1945, in the Supreme Court building in Berlin. The prosecution brought charges against 24 Nazi leaders and 6 criminal organizations: Hitler's cabinet, the Nazi Party leadership body, the SS and SD, the SA, the Gestapo, and the General Staff and High Command of the Wehrmacht. However, Heinrich Himmler, the architect of the SS and the man described as the greatest mass murderer of all time, could not be tried. On May 23, 1945, he managed to evade justice, at least in this life.